Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the holographic display, her dark eyes reflecting the swirling patterns of data that had consumed her life for the past 18 months. The sterile walls of Research Station Omega-7 hummed with the quiet efficiency of advanced technology, but Sarah heard only the screaming silence left behind by 300 missing souls. The Kithvar had called it a behavioral study. Their diplomatic corps had presented it to the Galactic Council with the cold precision of scientists discussing lab rats. We require specimens of the human species to understand their unique psychological patterns, their ambassador had stated, mandibles clicking in what other species mistook for politeness. Sarah called it exactly what it was: genocide with a laboratory coat. The hologram shifted, displaying the last known coordinates of the colony ship New Horizon: 300 families, 67 children under the age of 10. They had volunteered for humanity's first deep space colonization mission, seeking a new world beyond the overcrowded Sol system. Instead, they had found themselves specimens in an alien zoo. Dr. Chen. The voice belonged to Admiral Morrison, whose weathered face appeared on the secondary display. The Council has reached their decision. They're classifying the incident as an unfortunate miscommunication and issuing a formal reprimand to the Kithvar hegemony. Sarah's fingers tightened around the edge of the console. A reprimand. I understand your frustration, but do you? Sarah's voice cut through the transmission like a plasma torch through hull plating. Do you understand that they took 300 human beings and subjected them to psychological torture that would make our darkest historical experiments look like playground games? Do you understand that 18 children are dead because the Kithvar wanted to see how human offspring respond to systematic trauma? The Admiral's expression remained carefully neutral. The Kithvar have agreed to return the survivors and provide medical compensation. 97 survivors, Admiral, out of 300. Sarah turned away from the screen, her gaze falling on the personal files scattered across her workstation. Maria Gonzalez, age 8. Thomas Kim, age 4. Their photos smiled up at her from the digital displays, frozen in a happiness that the Kithvar had methodically dismantled. The Council considers the matter closed, Doctor. Sarah's laugh held no humor. Of course they do. Humanity is still the new species on the galactic block. Can't upset the established order over a few dead humans, can we? The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with her data and her rage. But rage, she had learned, was just another form of energy, and energy, properly directed, could move worlds. She had been humanity's foremost expert on alien psychology before the New Horizon incident. Now she was something else entirely. The Kithvar had made a fundamental error in their behavioral study. They had assumed human vengeance followed. The same patterns as other species. They expected lawsuits, diplomatic protests, maybe a few decades of cold relations. They had not expected Sarah Chen. The first phase took 6 months. Sarah infiltrated the Kithvar academic networks. Her reputation as a xenopsychologist opening doors that military intelligence never could. She attended their conferences, published papers on interspecies behavioral dynamics, and slowly, carefully, began to understand how the Kithvar mind worked. They were a hive species, not through biology, but through culture. Individual thought was discouraged. Dissent was pathology. Their entire civilization was built on the premise that the collective was always right, always rational, always justified in its actions. Sarah began to introduce small contradictions into their academic discourse. Papers that questioned established Kithvar psychological theories. Research that suggested their rational approach to other species might be rooted in primitive territorial instincts. She seeded these ideas carefully, allowing Kithvar academics to discover and develop them independently. The second phase began when the first Kithvar professor published a paper suggesting that their species' treatment of lesser races might be a form of psychological compensation for their own evolutionary insecurities. Within weeks, the academic community was divided. Debates raged in their journals. Factions formed. Sarah watched from her research station as Kithvar society began to turn on itself. The species that had tormented human children to study stress responses was now experiencing stress on a civilizational level. Their rigid social structure, their absolute faith in collective wisdom, Sarah had turned these strengths into weaknesses. The third phase was the most delicate. Sarah leaked carefully selected pieces of genuine scientific data, proof that human psychological resilience exceeded Kithvar projections by orders of magnitude. Evidence that the experiment had failed to break even the youngest human subjects in ways that would have shattered adult Kithvar. Documentation showing that Kithvar scientists had falsified their results because the truth was too disturbing to report. The revelation that their superior species had been humbled by human children they had tortured and killed, sent shockwaves through Kithvar society. Riots erupted on their homeworld. Their government fell within days. Their military fragmented as different factions claimed authority. Sarah watched it all from her station, her expression as calm as still water. She had not fired a single shot, had not built a single weapon, had not even violated a single galactic law. She had simply told the truth, in the right way, to the right minds, at the right time. When the final reports came in, the Kithvar hegemony fragmenting into a dozen warring factions, their space lanes closed to all outside traffic, their diplomatic corps recalled in disgrace. Sarah finally allowed herself a small smile. She opened a new file on her workstation and began typing her next research proposal. The Zelari Confederacy had recently requested human subjects for metabolic studies. According to the initial reports, they were particularly interested in human children. Sarah cracked her knuckles and began to work. After all, there was still so much research to be done. The universe had taught her that sometimes the most devastating weapons were not made of plasma or antimatter. Sometimes they were made of truth, patience, and the absolute certainty that humanity would never again be considered acceptable laboratory material. They had called it an experiment. She had called it a declaration of war, and Dr. Sarah Chen always finished what others started.